Hello world of YouTube and welcome to my next discography review. Today I'm going to be doing the one that I should have come back with, and that's the Georgia metal juggernaut Mastodon.
Johnny, what are you doing in my room, man? This is my filming room. You're not famous enough to be in here, okay? Do you even have 10K? Does he even have 10K?
Does he have 10K?
I don't think he has 10K. If you don't have 10K,
have 10K.
buddy, you're going to need to... Come on.
10K.
Get out.
10K?
Get out. 10K. Pull 10K. Get out. Pull 10K, then...
Even I got 10K. Yeah, you got 10K?
Hello world of YouTube and welcome to my new discography review, and it's one that I should have come back with in the first place because I was working on it beforehand.
Still not famous enough. 10K? Where's that 10K? I don't see it.
Oh, God damn it, no! Not again! Not again! This is good. The couch, the tried and true red couch. We're gonna do it here. But I ran all the way here from North Carolina, so I have to shower. Hello world of YouTube and welcome to my Mastodon Discography review. Over the years, Mastodon have slowly become one of my favorite bands. I think they're one of the most talented batch of musicians working together in the modern metal scene, the modern rock scene, and a lot of music. I think that everybody in the band, they contribute such great work. And that's one of the reasons why I was wanting to talk about their discography all those years ago, and my opinions have kind of held up as the years have gone on, as they've been releasing more music, and I figured finally should be the time for me to sit down and talk about their discography. Now, they have 7 main records, they have a compilation album that we're going to be talking about, and they have 2 EPs. Now, with this new format in mind, I didn't really know how to talk about EPs, but I figured the best way to at least try would be just a little rapid-fire discussion of them. There's only 2 of them, so we're going to knock that out of the way first. This was kind of a disappointment. Mastodon could easily write a fantastic film score and even channel this desert, sludgy sound a lot better than it's done here. A lot of the riffs are monotonous, and I wouldn't really recommend this to anybody, even Mastodon fans. I don't know anybody that really likes this thing. It's kind of an upset. I like some of the ideas of, like, using this riff to kind of be almost like a train sort of thing, but I don't think their ideas fully come together. I can see what they were going for, but I think they kind of failed on execution. You can kind of tell that this started off as a solo record for the guitarist, but they decided to bring in the rest of the band to make it a full-fledged Mastodon EP. But I'm not knocking it for that because there's a lot of talented playing on here, and even though it's a little more guitar-centric, I don't mind that. I think that the writing here is still as good as it is on your standard Mastodon record, and there's a lot here to sink your teeth into. It's almost a good supplementary release to their most recent record, which I was a huge fan of. Now, with those out of the way, let's get into it. Now, like Beck's discography, I like all of Mastodon's records for one reason or another, and someone's got to be on the bottom, and for me, The Hunter is the least compelling Mastodon record. This exemplifies an issue that I have with Mastodon, and that's they're not the best at writing transitional records. This is their most accessible as far as songwriting goes release, with all of these songs kind of being these shorter length tracks, and there's a more focus on harmonies and cleaner guitars that were present on Crack the Sky, just in a more digestible fashion. But I think they kind of stumbled out of the gate with introducing that style into their sound. I know that this record has more of its adored fans. I know Mark from Mad Sounds, this was kind of his introduction to Mastodon, and I would see this as a good introduction to Mastodon if you aren't the biggest metalhead and you're more of a rock fan. I do think that they improve upon this sound later on within the next couple of records, but I don't hate this thing. I think it's interesting that, to me at least, it draws a lot of influence from another Georgia stoner sludgy band, Baroness, but it does still have its Mastodonisms. There's still your Black Tongues and your Octopus Has No Friends and your Blasteroids that kind of exemplify earlier Mastodon style and a cleaner sound. As the years have gone on, I've warmed up to this record a lot more than I did initially, but I do think that this is still a solid record, and I think that if you do want to get into Mastodon and you aren't necessarily a heavy metal fan, this isn't a bad jumping on point necessarily. So Call of the Mastodon is an interesting beast because it's not really an album, but there are a large part of the Mastodon community that view it as such. It's more of a compilation of demos that they recorded before Remission, and you can definitely tell there's a lot of roughness around these edges, and some of these ideas feel a little half-baked. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. Mastodon are talented musicians, and this is them in their early primal stages, so you get some really thick moments, like on Thank You for This. But what I think is really interesting about this is that there are some really interesting progressive passages that they don't really explore until Leviathan and even Crack the Sky. There's more interesting instrumental passages on here that allude to a greater band within this earlier age. It's more for Mastodon fans that have enjoyed the discography and want to hear more of them in their earlier stages. Thank You for This and Shadows That Move kind of feel like pre-Remission offcuts, where tracks like Battle at Sea and We Built This Come Death almost seem like proto-Leviathan Crack the Sky sounds, and I really enjoy that. Now personally, I think this is what The Hunter should have been. This is a much more compelling listen than The Hunter. I think that they've stricken a better balance of catchier Mastodon with like High Road and The Mother Lode, with tracks like Halloween and Aunt Lisa, which even that is kind of a weird track for them. There's these weird chorus vocals that even to this day I'm not the biggest fan of, but they feel more akin to Mastodon's sound. I actually reviewed this record back when it dropped with Mark from Mad Sounds, and it was going to be the first part, well, the third part, but the first part of my discography review. So if you want to see my initial thoughts on the record, it's linked in the description. But over the years, I've warmed up to this record more like I did The Hunter. I did really like this thing upon its release more than The Hunter, but I think that as it sat with me and as it stewed with me, I do like its pacing a lot more than The Hunter. I think that they take you on a better musical journey. I think that it sounds more like a Mastodon record than a heavier Baroness record. And I don't mean that in a backhanded way. I love Baroness. I think that they're another really great band out of the scene that's brewing in Georgia. But I think that the writing on here is better. Even if it's not conceptual, like Mastodon records are known for having long concepts or really fantastically written concepts, I think that they wrote just a great straightforward rock album. This almost feels like the Color Before the Sun of their career if we're comparing two modern progressive acts that I'm a big fan of. This is almost a good companion record if you like The Hunter, but you want something a little heavier, because there are a lot more intense moments on here than there are on Hunter. Like if you like tracks like Blasteroid and you like the sound of that, you'll like the sound of this a lot more. Now, I know Remission has its die-hard fans, and I fucking love this record. Don't get me wrong, I think that it's a fantastic debut for these guys, and I think that it shows them at their grittiest, at their harshest, at their least digestible as far as cleanness is considered. But I think that they've written lyrically better albums than this. I do like the harshness in the vocals on here. I love like the first half of this record, especially with Crusher Destroyer's outright visceral assault. I think the guitars on this record cut so deep. They also do try to aim for the nosebleeds in their own really raw sort of way on like March of the Fire Ants. It's a big reason why I like especially the first half of this record, because it's paced like a perfect Mastodon record while having such a raw tenacity that just, God, it's invigorating. And they showcase an earnest talent even in this Genesis, but I think that there are more compelling records that they've written. This is a good album for sludge fans, and this is a great record if you do want to start with a Mastodon album that you already kind of established with who they are. This isn't a bad place to start if you want to kind of start here and go forward to see their evolution as a band. But again, like Beck, I think that they've written much more compelling records as they've continued to grow as a band. This is a hell of a Genesis. Trampled Underfoot, Trilobite, Trainwreck, all phenomenal Mastodon cuts. But God, they've done so much better.
Your adventure is dark and it hides
So I talked about this album in my albums of the year last year, like I did with Colors, and I just don't fucking understand why this album is so slept on. I mean, yes, it has Show Yourself, which is a really, really catchy cut that almost feels like it belongs on The Hunter, but even with its lyrical content, it's tied so well into this record. Like, this is almost the best conceptual Mastodon record outside of some of their other prime Golden Age material. I mean, fucking Jaguar God is such a touching tune. There are so many good choruses, and this is the best balance of that post-Crack the Sky sound with the pre-Crack the Sky sound. I've already said that in my one of the year wrap-up, but I mean, seriously, this album is so fucking good. The playing on this record is the tightest it's been since Crack the Sky. They just sound reborn as a band on this record, and I fucking love this thing. I think that they have written some of the most heartfelt stuff that they have in their career thus far, and that's because of its concept of dealing with death and cancer, and a lot of the poetic allegories on here are just touching. And I wish more people liked it. We're tying it into the review. If you've been following from The Hunter onward, this is a good step after Once More Round the Sun. If you still aren't ready to dive into the sludgier stuff like on Leviathan or Blood Mountain or Remission, this is, again, a good step forward after those more simpler records. So, like I said earlier in the video, Mastodon aren't the best at writing transitional records, and when they were trying to evolve their sound from the sludge-centric with slightly prog tendencies album of Leviathan to a much more progressive-styled record with Crack the Sky, they still made a kick-ass record in Blood Mountain, but it definitely feels like a meshing of two styles that, to some, may not work that well. I think Blood Mountain is a great record for those who like progressive Mastodon and sludgy Mastodon. I think it's still a good companion record to both of those styles. I mean, it's got your faster-driven tracks that would fit in well on Leviathan, like Blade Catcher and Capillary and Crest, but there are certainly some bigger sounds on here, like Colony of Birchman, which features Josh Homme on vocals, and Hunters of the Sky, which aims for the stratosphere, and I think sticks the landing. It's also their first non-literary concept album being about a werewolf, and that shows in that much more visceral lyrics. The lyric sheet on this thing is a lot more harsh than it is adventurous like it was on Leviathan. And that, I think, is another reason why I think it's a better record as a result. Its writing is so fucking good. I don't think they sacrifice their soundscape from Leviathan. They just showcase themselves as much more talented musicians. One of the things I did while I was in North Carolina was buy this at a local record store, because I fucking love this album. One of the big reasons why Mastodon are one of my favorite bands is I am a big fan of sludge music, and I fucking love progressive rock. And this is certainly the most progressive Mastodon album. I mean, it has a multi-part song in the Czar. I think that they do a multi-part song justice for a band that never really did that style. The Czar is fucking flawless, and it teases some of the more catchier tendencies that they'll do on the following records like Quintessence and Oblivion. The songwriting is just much stronger here than on the following records, and that's what sets it above that. This shows that they can write a hook, but they can tie it into the song so beautifully. They, like I said in the Emperor of Sand section, they don't nail this down this well until then, but this is just a fucking masterpiece. It's a modern metal classic. The playing is magnificent. There are so many lush fucking sounds on here, and everybody's up on the mic in such a great way. I love this thing. I like its ideas. I like its lyrical paintings it's dealing with, and I think that the band just, if you want that peak progressive Mastodon, this is the place to get it. If you're a fan of progressive metal and you want to get into Mastodon, this might be the best place to do it, because it's the best utilization of that style that they've sort of adapted after a certain point, done perfectly. And even though it's not my favorite Mastodon record, it's one that, like the next record I'm going to be talking about, immediately hooked me, and I've never let go. Leviathan was my jumping on point. I had heard Blood and Thunder in a soundtrack, and I decided to check out the record, and I was fully impressed with this thing. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard's Nonagon Infinity is the closest comparison I can give to an album that sounds like this, meaning that this album is paced and performed and written in a way that almost feels like one long jam session, you know. Blood and Thunder kicks down the doors, but then you just kind of ride the waves from I Am Ahab and Island and Iron Tusk having all these like really well done, constructed, driving songs that have riffs that kind of almost feel like they tie into each other in a weird sort of way. It kind of flows like the ocean does, while breaking up these driven songs with softer cuts like Sea Beast and the last track, Joseph Merrick, which is this beautiful instrumental. While this is a concept album, and everyone knows it's kind of a concept album about Moby Dick, it tackles the idea of that book in a really, not loose way, but in a way that doesn't detract from the record itself. Sure, if you know Moby Dick, you might get more enjoyment out of the record, but you don't need that. It's written in a way that not knowing the source material will detract from your experience, because I didn't at first. I wasn't versed in Moby Dick. It's got some catchiness at some points, but it's still just a dense, heavy record. It's sludgy as fuck. I love its just outright guttural vocal lines. I think they improved upon Remission's aggression in a great way on Leviathan. Like, if you thought Remission was a little hard to get into, this is a good jumping on point, because it's still got that density and that sludge sound that was present on Remission, but it's a little tighter, it's a little better written, and it's just a little more accessible, and it breezes by its runtime in such a great fashion. You want a tight 10 songs that works? This is a tight 10 songs that works. They, like on Crack the Sky, reach for the stratosphere. They just bury it in a lot of dirt and grit, and it's so good. And that was my Mastodon Discography review. It's been a long time coming. I hope that it was worth the wait and worth the hype. If you've been waiting for it for so long, I want to thank John, Hannah, and Crash for taking part in this video and helping me, you know, introduce this right. I already know what the next discography review is going to be, and I'm going to be working on it over the next month or so. It should come out either in late October or early November. But in the meantime, hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you check out Mastodon. I'm going to go. I have been Viralrak. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.